With Odegaard now shining bright as one of Arsenal's main men, I've noticed a lot of people seem to have forgotten about his past. Despite being only 24, Odegaard made his debut at the top level 11 years ago. Yeah, at 13 years of age. Back then, he was quite simply the most hyped wonder kid in the world, sort of like Hakim Mastur or Freddy Adu, and though those two ended up, well, one in the Moroccan second division and the other working as a PE teacher, for a while it seemed Odegaard was headed the same way. Even Arsene Wenger, who tried to sign him when he was just 15, admitted that for a while he was convinced Odegaard's career wouldn't amount to anything, which only makes it more impressive that he's become so successful. It's one thing to be called a wonder kid and then steadily make it to the top, but making it after being labeled a teenage flop, that's what makes Odegaard so special, cause you see, talent was a given. After all, his dad Hans-Erik Odegaard was a top-flight footballer, so the genetics were on his side. It was something else he got from him that made the difference. His discipline. They say despite school and 3 training sessions each week at his local club, Odegaard managed to fit in 20 extra hours of individual practice every week. But as he himself would say, you might think you know this story. Pushy dad makes his son practice every day, but actually, it was the opposite. His dad made him fall in love with the act of training, and soon, even when neither his dad nor his friends wanted to join in, Odegaard would still go down to the training center of his childhood team Strømsgodset and ask to be led into the pitch. He came over so often the night guard knew it was him just by the way he greeted him over the doorbell speaker. At 12 years of age, Odegaard was a mentality monster, and so everyone at Strømsgodset decided that before their golden egg goose was taken away from them, they had to do the unthinkable. They had to give a 13-year-old his professional debut. But after that friendly against Mjøndalen, Bayern spotted him, got him on a plane, and had him training at their academy for 4 days. It really seemed that Strømsgodset was going to lose him, but for some reason Odegaard ended up flying back to Norway without even receiving an offer. Keep this in mind, it will be relevant later on. From that moment on, though they tried, Strømsgodset could not resist calling him up for an official match, and about a year later, he became the youngest ever player to take part in the Norwegian League at only 15 years of age. At first, he wasn't even supposed to make more than 3 appearances a season. In fact, the league wouldn't even allow more than that since he was still on an amateur contract. But then, he surprised everyone with an incredible performance on his debut, even getting an assist, and about a month and a half later, they had already used up the 3 matches he was allowed to play, even scoring the winning goal in the last one of those, leading the manager to claim, in bad times you need a superhero, and it seems a 15-year-old is the closest thing we got to one. As you might imagine, that same week they caved in and handed him his first professional contract. A year before, an interviewer had claimed that no one knows him in Norway, but he is wanted by Bayern. Well, now everyone knew him, and so the discourse over how he would deal with the pressure of being a superstar at such a young age started building up. I remember seeing this news clip. It looked like a school ceremony, and a reporter asked the kids about him, and one of them said something that struck a chord with me. He called him a role model. You see, Denmark had Laudrup, Schmeichel and Simonsen, Sweden had Zlatan and Larsen, Finland had Litmanen, but Norway, they didn't have much aside from hope. Odegaard was hope. Can you imagine dealing with those kinds of expectations at 15? For some perspective, at the time, most of his interviews consisted of him being asked how he dealt with his own work. Because keep in mind, he was still in school, he had to be, and that was a problem actually, as he was unable to train with Strømsgodset most of the time, instead being sent to train with Mjøndalen, an amateur team where his father was a coach. But still, somehow, in the middle of all of this mess, he remained focused. When they asked him about it, he even said, "If I get carried away now, I won't get far in 10 years. I'm supposed to be at my best then, not now." It was such a mature thing to say, but it ended up working only as extra motivation to move him even further down the Wonder Kid supply chain, with the national team calling him up for the first time soon after this. Surprise, surprise, it was their youngest ever, and of course he took the Man of the Match award on his debut, leaving every Norwegian desperate to watch him again. They were so anxious that after the manager left him on the bench for 3 consecutive matches, the fans began booing the coach at every chance. The media made the most of it as well, constantly pushing the idea that Odegaard should be a starter, and soon the manager caved in, subbing him on with 26 minutes left in a match against Bulgaria and watching the stadium erupt in cheers, a standing ovation for a 15-year-old with 1 international cap. It was absurd. Just 3 months later, Odegaard was finishing his first season. He had played 23 matches, though they only amounted to about 1,400 minutes, and still had managed 5 goals and 7 assists. It was impossible to deny his talent. In fact, Bayern's chairman was so upset they had let him leave without a contract the year before that he set up an investigation across the club to figure out who was the culprit for this blunder. Because at this point, everyone wanted him. He traveled all across Europe, got a tour of every stadium. It was more than he could have ever even dreamed of. Even Guardiola was desperate to sign him. Once he saw the national team coach in Dubai and instantly approached him shouting at him, "Get him to Bayern, I will make him the best player in the world." To which he told him, "That would be good, but she'll be out of Bayern soon." Little did he know that wasn't a problem either, as he had already gotten his next club, Man City, to meet with Odegaard, using the prospect of Guardiola arriving soon as a negotiation tactic. The clubs were willing to try anything. They say Man United even sent Van Gaal alongside Solskjaer, one of Odegaard's idols, to meet with a family in Norway. And Barcelona even gifted them tickets to their match versus Ajax and gave them a tour of La Masia. In fact, it's been claimed a million times that it'd probably have ended up there if not for the fact they were hit with a transfer ban in 2016. Another club who you might be surprised to know was already trying their hardest to sign him all the way back then was Arsenal. In fact, Wenger personally took Odegaard out to dinner once. Can you imagine being in that position? Odegaard has admitted that Arsenal were his favorite team growing up, that just months before that dinner, he was playing FIFA career mode pretending to be Wenger and then signing himself. On the day of that dinner, he was so nervous he remembers looking at his fries and thinking, "Is he analyzing me now? Is it bad if I eat the fries?" So he just left them on the plate. At the time, it seemed the only person to not have a stab at signing him was Mourinho, who even claimed, "I have heard news that he's signing for 25 different clubs. I'm not gonna compete with 25 clubs." Regardless, in the end, he signed for Real Madrid. Some say what made the difference was that Real promised him he'd train with the main team. Odegaard himself said it was because he would have the chance to be coached by Zidane in the second team, and he just couldn't say no to working with one of his idols. But the more cynical will tell you something else. Odegaard's family was always pushing strangely hard for him to join Real. Maybe it was because of the fact that the club had promised his father that if his son signed for them, they would sign him as a youth coach. And I know, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but well, normally youth coaches don't get paid $1.2 million per year. But Odegaard's father, he did. Still, let's move on. With 2.3 million going the other way, Odegaard arrived in Madrid. He got on the jet thinking he'd have time to dress up in the hotel before the presentation, but instead, they drove him directly there. The result was Odegaard doing his presentation in a striped sweater, looking more nervous than ever. As he said it himself, "I was supposed to be this player Real had beaten everyone to sign, and I look like a random school kid they pulled from the stadium tour." Which was a strangely accurate way of putting it. Regardless, his lack of proper attire did not stop his signing from causing an impact. That year in Norway, there were more Real Madrid shirts sold with Odegaard's name on the back than with Ronaldo's name. And speaking of the big man, 3 months later, Odegaard finally debuted for the main team, and the world stopped to watch as Ronaldo was subbed off for a 16-year-old. The hopes were high, everyone stood still waiting for something to happen, but it never really came, and 5 years would go by before Odegaard got to play another league match for Real Madrid. So, what went wrong exactly? Well, Carlo Ancelotti, the coach at the time of Odegaard's arrival, would eventually call the transfer a PR exercise, saying, "When Florentino buys a Norwegian, you have to accept it. Then he decides the kid has to play 3 matches with the first team. Okay, it could be the best player in the world, but I don't care because he was not the player I asked for." As you can probably tell, Odegaard was caught in the middle of a war much bigger than himself, and that wasn't even his biggest problem. Because Odegaard had been promised that he'd train with the first team, but that meant he never got to see his actual teammates in the B team, meaning not only that a disconnect was formed, but also that according to some, there was a lot of envy. I mean, he was a 16-year-old who only shows up for the matches and makes more money than the rest of his teammates could even imagine. It wasn't easy for the other players or for Odegaard. He wasn't part of either team. He was stuck in the middle. In reality, it didn't matter what happened, he never stood a chance to begin with. I mean, while being coached by Zidane in the Castilla, he was literally their top assist provider, and still once the Frenchman took over the first team, all he could get for Odegaard was a Copa del Rey appearance versus a third-tier club. I mean, they had Modric, Kroos, Casemiro, Khedira, James and Isco. There was no space for a kid to fit in, but still the media was relentless, insisting it was make or break it time for Odegaard, and the fans were even harsher online, ridiculing him with all sorts of memes. After all, it had been 679 days since he joined, and he was only now making his first start. To everyone's eyes, Odegaard was a flop, an 18-year-old flop. This could have broken anyone, but instead, Odegaard took charge and asked the club to be loaned out. For a second, he almost ended up at Rennes, but in the end, Heerenven was his destination. And if there's something that serves as proof that Real Madrid didn't 100% believe in his ability to break into any team, it's the fact they inserted a clause that demanded Heerenven paid him 40,000 euros every time he was kept on the bench. And to be fair, they weren't too far off. There were a bunch of times Heerenven played him for just a few minutes to avoid paying the fee, and even when he broke into the team, many didn't hesitate to describe his time there as average. Some blame his metatarsal injury, some blame the quality of his teammates, some blame the coach for moving him around too much, but in the end, Odegaard failed to leave much of a mark. And after a year and a half trying to compensate for those last 2 points, Real sent him to Vitesse, where he was not only joined by better players but offered a much higher degree of freedom on the pitch, and the result was stunning. 11 goals and 12 assists in 39 matches, even winning the award for Vitesse's Player of the Year by a landslide. At this point, it seemed Real would finally go all out trying to fit him into their team, so despite offers from several Premier League sides and even Ajax, who saw him as a replacement for the young, they instead brought him to Real Sociedad on loan, looking for that bit of La Liga credibility they felt he needed. And this was simply a masterclass of a move. Odegaard fit in tremendously well. Right in the month of September, he was already being handed the league's Player of the Month award. In fact, I just gotta say this, he was also the club's Player of the Month, and the award for that was a fish. But moving on, 10 matches into the season, somehow Real Sociedad were third, 1 point from the top. They were playing incredible football, some of the best in Europe according to many, and in the middle of it all stood Odegaard. This was his confirmation season. With 7 goals and 8 assists in his first 24 matches, he had simply won over the hearts of the fans, and even if the rest of the season didn't go as well as those first months, Sociedad not only secured qualification for the Europa League, but went on an incredible Copa del Rey run that saw Odegaard score or assist against every team he faced as they won their first trophy in 33 years. Though, to be fair, Odegaard didn't get to play in the final as it was delayed for a full year in the midst of the pandemic. Regardless, as the season came to an end, Odegaard wanted to stay. He felt he had found the perfect place to build the foundation of his career. But once again, Zidane came calling, promising him things would be better this time. And with the memories from their time together in the B team carrying some weight, Odegaard caved in. And once again, things turned for the worst. Before the season even started, he got COVID and was forced to play the first few matches while still in recovery, failing to cause an impact. Then, after just 1 more minute of game time, he got injured while on international duty and got sidelined for a full month. By January, he had only gotten 3 more starts. Suddenly, it seemed he was back to square one, but that's when Mikel Arteta called him and told him about his project. And as Odegaard would say, I challenge anyone to come away from a meeting with Arteta and not believe everything he tells you. Only a few days later, he joined Arsenal on loan, quickly impressing the fans who began clamoring for a permanent deal. By March, he had been made captain of his national team. By August, Arsenal had forked out 40 million for his signing, and 1 year later, he was made captain there as well. Now they're just a few matches away from their first Premier League title since 2004, and if not for the ironic arrival of another Norwegian, he'd be a top candidate for Player of the Year. Looking back on the roller coaster of his career, Odegaard has said, life is not career mode. You can't just choose where to go and things aren't always perfect. But now, every time I walk into that stadium, I get goosebumps. The kid I used to be would have died for this. And still, the best is yet to come.